Hello everyone, welcome to Easy Economics. How are you all doing? I hope you all are doing good. Today I brought for you all February March 2025 0455 IGCSE variant 22. Today we'll be dealing with section A of our paper 2. So let's dive quickly into the case study. This time the source material refers to Romania. First, they've given us a source table which talks about the population, the household spending, and the poverty level in Romania. They have given us the current account deficit that was around 9%. GDP hovered around $300 billion. Unemployment rate was 5.2%. Economic growth rate was 4.8%. Inflation rate was 13.8%. The percentage of women of working age in the labor force was around 42%. Now, what do they say? They say between 1990 and 2022, Romania's population fell from 23 million to 19 million. And what were the reasons behind the fall in the population? They say the country's birth rate and death rate both fell during this period. Some workers from other countries, including Sri Lanka and Vietnam, came to live in Romania. However, more Romanian workers left the country to work and live mostly in other European countries. Now, what are they saying? They're saying the difference between the people who left and the people who came. So, more individuals left rather than those who came to Romania. And there was also a fall in the birth rate and the death rate that contributed towards the fall in the population of Romania between this time period. Now, the second paragraph talks about the growth rate, and it says if the Romanian economy continues to grow at its relatively high rate, fewer of its people may immigrate and more immigrants may be attracted. Now, they are saying if the country continues to grow at this growth rate, so the possibility is, or the chances is, that less people would be leaving Romania and more would be attracted to come and reside over here. Recent economic growth has been driven largely by increases in household spending. And now they are saying that the economy has been growing. Why? Because people or the average consumer has been spending more. Romanians have become wealthier, more confident about their future, and have experienced low interest rates. So, what are the reasons why they're spending more and more? It's because the interest rates are low. This means what? They're able to get loans at friendly rates, cheap rates, they can borrow, right? So that's why they're spending. And because they're more confident about the future, so that means they're more optimistic regarding the country's progress or the country's economic growth rate. They've got confidence in the country's currency or the economic outlook looks quite positive to them, right? Similarly, they also say that the Romanians have become wealthier. So that means they have experienced a higher standard of living. They are becoming affluent, they are becoming wealthier, they're becoming richer. Their purchasing power has risen, right? So far, good. All right. Now, what do they say? Now, they say in April 2022, the Romanian government placed a maximum price on electricity. Now, we all know a maximum price is a price that's based below the level of the equilibrium price, right? So, it was actually doing what? Subsidizing the rate of electricity in one way, you could say that, right? Romanians spend a relatively high proportion of their income on electricity and on food. So, two things on which Romanians spend much of their income is electricity and food. Now, Table 1.1 shows selected countries' GDP per head and the average spending on food as a percentage of the total household spending. Now, they've given us this table and they've given us these 7 countries. They've given us statistics for two variables GDP per head and the average spending on food as a percentage of the total household spending. That means, on an average, how much each household in each of these countries spend on food, right? Now, what I have done is, you see these numbers circled in red. You see these numbers? You see these numbers circled in red? Now, what I have done is that I have written in ascending order the countries that have the highest GDP per head. So the highest GDP per head is being enjoyed by which country? Norway. Then it's USA with 70,500, right? Then the third one is Belgium. Then it's Romania. Fifth is Egypt. Sixth is Cambodia. And on the last is Ethiopia. Right? Now, what do they say? The poor are particularly affected by changes in electricity prices and food prices. Romania has a high level of poverty. To reduce poverty, some economists have suggested that the government should attract more MNCs to Romania. MNCs may affect poverty because of the possible effects on unemployment and prices. So now, since the country is being affected by poverty, economists suggest that yes, let's invite more multinationals. What will multinationals do when they come and operate in your country? So what do? They set up their firms, they set up their production facilities. So what happens? The employment level rises. So when the employment level rises, what happens? The people in your country get better off, right? They get a living, they get earnings, the standard of living improve, right? So economic growth experiences, right? Another way to reduce poverty would be to encourage more women to work. So they found out two ways in order to address the issue of poverty. A, either invite MNCs, B, encourage more of women to be a part of the labor force. The proportion of women in Romania who work or seek work has fallen in recent years. But what has happened is that recently the proportion of women who used to be a part of the labor force has witnessed a decline. That means if initially more women were encouraged or were attracted to be a part of the labor force, now there has been a decline. Less of them opt to work. Now, why? There is a range of influences on whether women enter the labor force. Now, there are factors which affect towards the amount of women who are willing to work. And what are those factors? Social attitudes. That means, is your culture encouraging women to be a part of the labor force? Do they accept it? Are they encouraged? Do they get a support from back at home to, earn a living, side by side, rear children, bring up their families? Female education. What is the level of education? How educated are the females in the country? And whether childcare facilities and part-time work is available. So if daycare facilities are available and flexible working hours or work from home or working for lesser hours are provided to the female, so it's likely or the chances are high that females would in Romania would be a part of the labor force. So far, so good? All right. Now, let's look at the questions. Question number 1. Now, what I'll do is, if you look at the right-hand side, I've solved in the questions for you. So now I'll zoom in the answers. All right. Question number 1, part A. Now, if you look at the instructions clearly say refer to the source material in your answer. So just remember, whenever we are addressing section A, whatever answers we are answering that fall in section A, you need to extract the data from the source material. Reference must be made in order to score high. I'll keep on reminding you, just ensure that yes, you make a reference to the source. All right. Part A. Part A asks us to calculate Romania's current account deficit on its balance of payment in dollars. It's a 1-mark question. So what you got to do is you need to calculate the current account deficit, right? So now, how did I extract the information? Where did I get that from? I'll scroll in. See, the very first table, which yielded us Romania's fact file, they gave us the percentage of GDP that stood as the current account deficit and the balance of payment was 9%. So 9% of what? Of GDP. And what was the GDP in 2022? $300 billion. So I took these two figures. So what I did was 9% of the GDP. 9% of the GDP is what? 9 upon 100 into 300, right? Which would give you $27 billion. So you've shown the working and you've done that. You got 1 mark. I hope this is clear. Part B. Part B asks us to identify two reasons why Romania's population fell between 1990 and 2022. And if you could recall, we had identified that there was a fall in the birth and the death rate, and the people who left the country to work were more than those who came in. So, exactly these are the two reasons which I've written. The question asks us to identify two reasons. All we've got to do is, again, it's a 2-mark question. You just need to list down those two reasons why Romania's population fell. A, you could say there was a fall in the birth rate, or you could say people left the country to work. Romania's people left the country to work, or you could say there was a rise in the emigration, right? Mention any of these 2 points and you'll get full 2 marks. Moving on. Part C. Part C is again a 2-mark question, and Part C asks us explain why immigration into Romania may increase in future. Now they are asking us, why do you think in future immigration would increase? That means what? That means more people would be coming in to live in Romania. Why do you think so? So what you got to do is just give one reason and provide an explanation to that. So you'll get 1 mark for the explanation and 1 mark for that reason. And you'll get full 2 marks. You will have to expand on your answer, develop that chain and link analysis, right? Now, what you could say is, you could say that since it's expected that Romania is going to experience high economic growth rate, and if the country continues to grow at this rapid rate, it would be that the country would be able to offer more job and there would be more work opportunities in Romania. Hence, the living standard of the people would rise. People would get better off. They would be getting richer. The GDP per head would rise. They would be getting wealthier and they would be enjoying a higher standard of living. As a result, more and more people would be attracted to live in Romania. You mentioned that. You've gotten full 2 marks. I hope this is clear. Part D. Part D asks us to explain 2 reasons why household spending rose in Romania. Now, this was a 4-mark question. How are the marks going to be distributed? 1 mark for the first reason, and the 2nd mark for the explanation of the first reason. The 3rd mark for identification of the 2nd reason, and for the explanation of the 2nd reason, you'll get the final 4th mark. So, 2 reasons, an explanation of each of these reasons for 4 marks. Now, why do you think? Give the reasons why household spending rose in Romania. Now, remember, they had given us these 3 reasons. Romanians have become wealthier, more confident about their future, and have experienced low interest rates. So, these are exactly the points that I've mentioned. You would say that Romanians have become wealthier. As a result, their standard of living has risen. They are enjoying a higher purchasing power. They are able to spend more on the provision of goods and services. As a result, their spending rose. Or you could say that yes, the Romanians are more optimistic about the country's future progress. They are looking at the level of the economic growth the country is experiencing. The Romanians have increased their spending and on goods and services. As a result, they are saving less and spending more. They have got higher confidence in the economic situation of the country, and they have got a positive outlook regarding the country's economy. As a result, they are spending more. Or you could say that since the country is enjoying low interest rates, they are able to borrow or have loans at subsidized rates, friendly rates, so they are spending more and saving less. Or the 4th reason you could be that since the inflation is high, in order to meet the higher rate of inflation and in order to meet the higher rate of inflation, they are spending in order to maintain that standard of living. So choose any of these 2 reasons, develop that cause and link analysis, that chain analysis, cause and effect reasoning, expand on those answers, give the explanation, and you'll get full 4 marks. I hope this is clear. Moving on. Part E. Part E asks us to draw a demand and a supply diagram showing the effect of maximum price on electricity. It's a 4-mark question. All you need to do is give the correct construction of a demand and a supply diagram. Now, how are the marks going to be distributed? 1 mark is going to be given for the correct construction of the vertical and the horizontal axis. The second mark for correct construction of the demand and the supply diagram, the curves, for clearly mentioning and labeling of the maximum price, the third mark, and the final mark for the displaying of quantity demanded and quantity supplied on the horizontal axis. So what you will do is, on the vertical axis you will mention price, on the horizontal axis you will mention quantity. You will draw a normal downward sloping demand curve and an upward sloping supply curve. Now, we all know that a maximum price is a price that is set below the equilibrium price. So, if this was the equilibrium price, now since the government is setting a maximum price, it has to be below the equilibrium price. So, you'll put it here and you label it P max. Then this is the quantity supplied, this is quantity demanded, and the difference, which is highlighted by yellow, displays the shortage in supply of electricity. Right? So, you fulfill all these four requirements and you will be able to get full 4 marks on this part. I hope this is clear. Moving on. Part F. Part F is an analyze question, and there is a way to answer analyze questions of section A. Part F asks us to analyze the relationship between the GDP per head and the average spending on food as a percentage of total household spending. Now, if you look at the question, this is of how many marks? This is of 5 marks. Now, first and foremost, we're going to be answering this question with the help of this table, table 1.1. Now, first, you will mention the type of the relationship. You will say that overall, there is a negative relationship or an inverse relationship between the GDP per head and the average spending on food as a percentage of total household spending. Now, what does this mean? What does this mean? That the higher the GDP per head, the lower the average spending on food as a percentage of total household spending. What does this mean? That the higher the GDP per head, the lower the average spending on food as a percentage of total household spending. That means as the countries start to earn more and more on GDP per head, the spending on food would reduce as a proportion of total spending. They would be spending less. What makes us say that? First, I'm just explaining you the answer, then I'll show you with the help of the data why. If you look at the last 5 countries on GDP per head, now look at the last 5 countries. We start from Romania. Romania is earning, we'll begin with Belgium. Belgium is earning 52,100. So 52,100 GDP per head. The average spending was 13%. Next, it's followed by Romania. Romania was earning 15,000 GDP per head, and its spending on food is 26%. Then it's Egypt, which was earning a GDP per head of 3,850, but the spending on food 33%. So now notice, as the GDP per head is declining, the percentage spent on food is increasing. Cambodia with a GDP per head 1,800 and spending of 42%. Ethiopia of 960 and spending of 56%. Right? So far you've followed these 3 steps, and 3 marks out of a total of 5 you've attained so far. Now, but there exists an anomaly. There exists an exception. And what's the exception? That which country was earning the highest? Norway. Which country was earning the highest? It was Norway, 89,200. But look at the spending. It's 11%. And it's followed by what? USA. And what was the USA spending? 6%. So now, if Norway was the country that was earning the highest GDP per head of 89,200, its average spending should have been lesser than USA. But it's spending more. Norway should have been spending less, but Norway is spending 11 and USA is spending 6. This means what? So this is the exception. This means, then you'll give a reasoning. This means that either you could say that food items are expensive in Norway, or you would say that Norwegians purchase a high proportion of high quality food. You give a reason. You say either the Norwegians purchase a high proportion of high quality food or the food items are expensive in Norway. That's the only reason why, though Norway has the highest GDP per head, is spending a larger proportion on food as compared to USA that follows after it. All right. Part G. Part G says discuss. No, it's a discuss question. And how many marks it is? It's again a 6 mark question. Now, we all know in order to answer a discuss question, we need to produce a well balanced argument. You need to provide in both pros and cons. You need to provide in statements, reasoning for both statements that go with the question and which go against the statement of the question, a yes and a no, both sides, a well balanced argument, right? If you just mention one side, you will not be able to score more than 4 marks, right? So you need to produce a well balanced argument followed by a good conclusion, a justified conclusion and reasoning, right? Now, discuss whether or not MNCs reduce poverty in their host countries. So, first and foremost, tell me what are MNCs? A multinational is what? It's a truly global business, right? With what? With premises and productive operations in more than one country. So, this means a multinational will own a number of subsidiary companies located in other countries, and it will be producing goods and services in those countries. And then these goods and services can then be sold to consumers in these countries, or they could also be exported around the world, right? And the headquarters of an MNC is usually based in the countries of origin, right? So now we could say yes, MNCs would be able to reduce poverty in their host countries. Why? Because once they are established in the host countries, so what happens? They set up their production facilities and they give in employment, and as a result, the unemployment level in these countries fall, right? So what happens that since they are going to be providing job opportunities, so the income level of the people is going to rise and the purchasing power of people is going to improve. As a result, the standard of living is going to rise and the poverty level in those countries is going to fall. Overall, the people are going to be better off and the economy is going to experience economic growth rate. The PPC would be shifting outwards towards the right, showing an increase in the productive potential of the economy. It could also be that MNCs bring in new technology and would be able to produce high quality, innovative products, thereby again increasing the standard of living of the country. It could also be that they provide training and increase the skills of the labor force, thereby adding towards the occupational and the geographical mobility of the workers, thereby again increasing the standard of living of the population, right, of the country. Another good reason would be that MNCs pay taxes and these are a good source of income for the government to fulfill other macroeconomic aims. However, you could say that the advent of MNCs might not be able to reduce the level of poverty in the host countries. Rather, it could be that instead of providing employment opportunities, they might employ capital intensive production methods, which means that the level of employment would rather reduce and unemployment might rise. It could also be that they might do repatriation of profits and instead of investing their money or the profits back into the host country, they might send their profits back to their host countries, or they might exploit the labor. If the country provides cheap labor, they might not provide them sufficient working environment, or they might not provide them market attractive or market salary, right? They might not pay them well or might not provide them better remuneration, right? It could also be that they might be biased and they might be giving employment to their own country workers. So this means that the poverty level of the host countries might not reduce, rather it might aggravate. It could also be that they might be exploiting natural resources or providing or giving damage or environmental damage by way of pollution and thereby jeopardizing or making economic growth of the host countries, putting economic growth of the host countries, future economic growth of the host countries at stake. It could also be that these MNCs might grow in size or might be a monopoly and they might be charging excessive prices, right? and they might drive local producers out of the business. So, the conclusion would be that MNCs might help in reducing the poverty in the host countries by creating the job opportunities and by providing training and skill development of workers, by bringing in new technology and investing in infrastructure development. However, the extent to which their presence would be beneficial would be dependent on how positively would they be contributing towards the economic growth and the development of the host country's economy, thereby reducing its poverty. If the host country, now this is a very important part, if the host country enforces a strong regulatory system, the positive aspects can be reaped while preventing the exploitation of workers and resources. So if it's just the country or the government has its mind that it's an MNC and it would be beneficial for the country, so let's invite or let's provide in more benefits for the MNCs to set up their production facilities or their outlets here in our country, that would not go. You might have to establish a strong regulatory system in order to put a curb on the negative aspects of having MNCs in your country. So you need to ensure that, yes, the positives outweigh the negatives. All right. I hope you've understood. Part F. Again, it's the last part. Again, it's a discuss question. Again, it's 6 marks. Again, you need to produce a well-balanced argument, both sides. This question asks us, part H, it's a discuss question. It's asking us whether or not a higher proportion of women is likely to enter Romania's labor force in the future. Again, you need to produce a well-balanced argument. If you say, yes, Romania's population, it's likely that a higher proportion of women will be entering Romania's labor force in the future. You could say that, yes, if the country is successful in providing part-time jobs or provide flexible working hours, it's likely, the chances are high that, yes, in future, looking at the poverty situation, more and more females would be inclined to be a part of the labor force. Similarly, if more childcare facilities are provided, it would be easier for the females to earn a living, thereby also look after their families and do child rearing. Similarly, if more and more female are provided with the training or the education and they have the skills and the talent and abilities to work, they would be inclined towards being a part of the labor force. Similarly, if more and more healthcare facilities are provided, they would be inclined to be a part of the labor force, and their mobility, the occupational mobility would improve to a sizable extent. However, it could be if the social attitudes are negative and they are not encouraged by the society to be a part of the labor force, the chances are low that they would be a part of the labor force. It could also be that since the poverty level is reducing, it would no longer be required that females would be a part of the labor force, and the standard of living would be better off without they being a part of the labor force. It could also be that if the working hours do not reduce, it will be impossible for them to look after their families and work side by side. Or if there exists discrimination, that means if the males are provided with better living, better working conditions, or higher salaries, they would be discouraged to be a part of the labor force if there exist differentials in wages or working conditions. So, conclusion. A higher proportion of women may become part of Romania's labor force in future if they are provided with better education or they are encouraged to participate and are given government support. However, if cultural attitudes and challenges such as childcare are not adequately tackled, then their entry might be slow or they might be discouraged to be a part of the labor force. So, I hope you understood this part and you've enjoyed solving this paper with me. I'll be back with the rest of this paper. Stay tuned, subscribe, happy learning.